Good morning, good afternoon, good
Morning.
evening, and good day. I'm just pouring some tea for us here.
The audio's working. That's good.
Would you like a teacup?
Yes,
Cup of
please.
tea?
Thank you.
It's herbal.
It is. Yeah, we haven't had this in a while.
I know, this is a good one.
Kava, it's relaxation tea.
Yes.
Yeah. South
Calming.
American, I think.
I think so, yeah. It's a cold and rainy day where we are right
Sleety,
now.
yes.
So it's nice to have this warm beverage in hand.
We're back in the US time zone, so that's why we have a different time for the live.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
We like mornings.
Yes. We're morning people, I guess.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to be talking about the topic we're talking about today. That was
Me
a lot of
too.
talking.
Yeah. What do we got?
So we're going to look at the Dell Hymes Speaking Model, which is a framework that we use to analyze and understand how different speech communities converse and speak. So it's a great way of understanding different cultures and different speech communities and how they use language.
Great.
How we use language.
Yeah. Because presumably we're part of a few.
I would think so. Yeah, of course we are. So this is a fun one.
Great.
But before we jump in, how's your day going so far?
My day is good. Yeah, we're just getting over jet lag. Jet lag is, I don't know, if anyone who's done sort of more than, I would say, 7 or 8 hours of time zone difference, it's a real struggle.
It really is.
Coming from where we were, we're looking at like 12, 13 hours of jet lag. And it takes, in my experience, no matter what I do, it takes like a good 5-7 days to get over.
I remember sometimes, like in the past, it would take me like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
To really just get back into the groove of the original time zone that I was familiar with.
Because your body thinks it's morning when it's night and thinks it's night when it's morning. So you'll wake up in the middle of the night, like 3 a.m., 4 a.m. and not be able to go back to sleep.
Yeah, it's
tough. But fortunately, last night was a good night of sleep.
Yes.
So I'm feeling pretty fresh today.
Yes, that's good.
Yeah. How about you?
I'm feeling good as well. I'm
good.
Energized and ready to start the day.
That's what we want. Yeah.
So.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
So I think we should just run through. So the acronym SPEAKING is so cool because it stands for, I mean, not only does it show speaking, right? But it really makes sense once we reveal all the components. And there are actually there are 16 components.
What's this acronym from?
But 18 divisions. So Dell Hymes, the sociolinguist, came up with it. And it was part of the study of the ethnography of language use, which is essentially how we use language. And it really highlights that both language and culture are intertwined.
Right.
There's the interplay.
Is this what Dell Hymes would focus on primarily?
Yeah, he came up with it.
Okay, cool.
And it was a tool that linguistic anthropologists would use to, and still use, to analyze conversation across cultures, across speech communities, across groups of people that belong to a specific speech community. So it's a great way to just understand how we use language and to use it correctly, right? Because it's not just the vocab and the grammar that we need to know, but it's really the context that we use the language, like when it's appropriate to say what, to do what, to, right? I mean, it is part of the
interesting. It's funny, you would think that's sort of natural for us, that it happens intuitively.
Yeah.
But I guess it's helpful to have a framework because it doesn't always work that way, right?
I think definitely. I think if you are, and this is again, it's for people in, communities all over the world. It's not just for English, speakers of English, obviously.
Right.
It's for speakers of every language, even, the dialects that we have. But it's a really good way to sort of understand what we use when and why. But it's also really good for somebody who is learning a new language.
Particularly that is associated with a different culture.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think for people growing up with their native language, a lot of what we do is intuitive,
right?
Because it's just we learn the social norms governing the language. We sort of pick it up. But that's not to say that even with your own native language, your first language, that sometimes there's some, it's a little bit nebulous, right? Like when is it appropriate to use certain tonalities, and, when might it be a good time to interrupt someone?
Sure.
All of that stuff.
Cool.
So.
All right. So you're talking about speaking, this acronym.
Speaking, yes.
Yeah. So does each one of those letters?
Yeah, it does.
All right.
So let's dive into that.
Let me hear it.
Okay. So we have
a long
S.
One.
I know. It's 8, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hit me with it.
Okay. So the first one is S.
Okay.
Okay. So that's scene and setting, right? So what do you think that means?
The scene and setting. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's probably just, for example, we're in a living room. It's the scene and setting. We're in a live.
Yeah.
So is that our scene and setting?
That would be it. So it could be anything from the actual location that you are doing your speech act, performing rather. It could also be like the time when this is occurring.
Got it.
Okay.
Got it.
But then it could also be like the physical barriers that are present. So, for example, is there a table between you and the speaker? Is there a camera?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there, I don't know, chairs? Like what are the physical barriers as well? It could even be psychological, right?
I've never thought of a table as sort of influencing the nature of a conversation you have with someone.
Right.
But it totally can.
It does.
Think about actually when you go to a restaurant, for example, and we always sort of debate this when you and I are going out on a date, that we sometimes do. Probably should go more often. Where do you sit? Do you sit across from each other, or do you sit,
Yeah, that's interesting.
On sort of, what do you call it? Adjacent, right?
Adjacent, yeah.
So you could sit across, or you could sit adjacent, and you see both setups. And it's always something that I'm like, oh, which should we do?
What's your preference? Like, let's say we have a square table.
Yeah.
And it's just the two of us.
Yeah.
Or it's just, it's two people, let's say.
Right. It depends on my level of comfort with the person.
Right. Because you're closer on one angle than the other, than across, right?
Right. I find that, and I also it's my sort of what mood I'm in. If I'm feeling in a talkative mood, I want to be across from them.
Right.
Because then you're facing them. There's no distractions.
It's face to face.
It's face to face, right? Yeah. And I feel like that promotes that the dialogue. If I'm feeling a little tired, or I don't know, you also just be in an interesting place where you want to absorb a little more of the environment around you.
Yeah.
Then I like sitting sort of
at an angle.
Because then you speak to each other, and then kind of also look out and do a little people watching.
Right, that's true.
Right.
Oh, and on that, so I don't know how many of the viewers out there are familiar with Paris, France, but in Paris and other parts of France as well. There are the cafes that are there, which are amazing. I love the cafe culture there. They all face the sidewalk or the street rather.
Yeah.
And so basically, if you're outside alone having your coffee and reading your paper, or if you're with people, or if you're with one other person or whomever, you face the street, right?
Yeah.
And it's
even more extreme often because I feel like they're circular tables. Because you're not even, it's not even like corner to corner. It's like you guys are literally shoulder to shoulder looking out. You're shoulder to shoulder
and you're looking
almost
out.
Like we're sitting.
Exactly. And it's so interesting. I mean, it's so fun because it's people watching, and you're embracing sort of the environment. You're seeing what's happening. It's very dynamic, but then you're also chatting with the person next to you, or not. You might just be out there,
contemplative and
journaling or writing. Like
that's what all the authors and artists do.
Well, Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre, if I say it in like an English, like American accent, and his long-term partner, Simone de Beauvoir. Simone de Beauvoir, who wrote The Second Sex, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Was it The Second Sex? Anyway, I can't remember exactly because I'm thinking it in French, but they would go every day to Café de Flore and de Magot, which are in the Saint-Germain-des-Prés district of Paris. And they would have their table and they would have their like croissant and their espresso, whatever it was, cafe au lait or something. And they would—
Sounds idyllic.
I know, it really does though. And it would be so creative because you have the energy of like the city around you. You're surrounded by that.
Right.
And then you also have your space, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they would each go to like the separate ones, and they're right next door to each other.
Oh, they wouldn't sit at the same cafe?
No, but they're right next door to each other. Next time we go to Paris, I'll show you. We didn't get to do it on this trip. But so there's De Magot and there's Café de Flore. And I think Café de Flore is in the corner. Anyway, it really is.
Right. This
so
is all
important.
to say that the objects around you and your setting and context really can influence the environment and the nature of your communication.
It really does.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just on that note, think about a boardroom. Right? So oftentimes, I think you can speak to this pretty well because
my boardroom
all your meetings, you have a wide table. It's a big table, right?
Yeah.
And there's so much distance between you and the person seated across.
Yeah, talk about this.
Right?
This one always gets me. Okay, so the date seating is one thing.
Right.
Where it gets really complicated is when you have a business meeting in one of these rooms, because you typically do have this huge table.
Yeah.
And if you fill the table, okay, you figure it out, and you typically put the more senior people at the heads of the table or maybe in the center.
Yeah.
Where it gets really tricky though is if it's a meeting of like 4 or 5 people.
Oh yeah.
Right? You have this big boardroom table, but it's 4 or 5 people. It's like, do you sit, does your team sit on one side and they sit on the other? Do you mix it up? Do you, sit on one end and the other and you kind of talk to each other?
Send one of the carrier pigeons or...
What is it? Is it Beauty and the Beast where they sit like at way different sides of the table and it's like really silent? Right. So it gets kind of like, whoa, what do we do?
Yeah.
But you're right. In business context, it's also very relevant. Yeah.
And there's the distance there.
And the distance.
Yeah.
And I think the closer you are, the more intimate the conversation is going to feel, right?
And even more casual.
Casual.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So that's one example, or actually 2 examples right there for you. Three. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the first one. So we only made it as far as
that's number 1. All right.
That's one.
Let's breeze through a few.
But if you recall, the title of this live is it's Dell Hymes Speaking Model in Action.
In action, yes.
And we have the examples in there as well. So we're going to try to come up with as many examples.
Keep putting them in action
for you viewers out there. And if you are watching live right now, feel free to, on the sidebar there in the margin, send in your questions, comments, emojis, whatever.
Or if you have examples of what we're talking about.
Yeah, we welcome those. And if you're watching
share them with the group
later, if you're watching the replay, then you can comment below because we really want to keep this as an interactive discussion, synchronous or asynchronous.
And the object between us would be the computer and I guess the internet pipes connecting.
Yeah, and the microphone. Oh, here we go. Hello, ENROLL.
Hello.
Welcome to the live stream. Okay, so the second one. So we have S, right?
S.
Now we have P. So this one is participants.
Participants. Okay.
Okay, so that just means what? What does that mean?
The interlocutors.
Yeah, good job.
To use some linguistic parlance.
I know. Well done. So that just means the people who are involved in
the communication,
in the speech act.
Right.
And so it could be. So right now it's you and I because we're having a conversation.
Right.
And then if there are people out there, we have ENROLL here who just joined. Thank you.
Hello.
He's you're part of our discussion as well, right? So it's whomever is participating. And if you think about like a speech, right? If you're giving a speech, the participants would also be the audience.
Right. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
If it's a good speech, if it's a speech that's
hopefully if you don't get heckled.
Right. And here's an interesting thought. So you can be an active participant where you're sort of voicing and interacting with the speaker.
Right.
But I can also imagine I would also qualify participants as those who are just very engaged and listening attentively because the speaker is reading their facial expressions. And so even their silent participation is still influential.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And teachers good teachers have to read the room, right? So I remember when I was teaching, I had some trainees come in on my classes and watch them to to learn how to teach, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
right? To learn by doing. And so they came up to me afterwards and they were like, how do you manage all of the emotions in the room and the people in the room?
Yeah.
And it's a lot about reading the room. So like you said, even if they don't say anything, just that silence, right? Or a blank stare or an engaged
smile.
Yes. You can see the light bulbs go off, right?
Yeah,
When you're interacting with students. That tells you so much.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
and it drives to some extent what you say next.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah.
So that is true engagement in a sense.
So that's participants. Yeah.
Yep.
And then in the online realm, right? Let's say you're texting. It's the other person that you're texting with, or in a group chat.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. And then we have E, and it's ends. Okay, so ends. That's the purpose, it's the outcome, the intention, right?
Okay.
The goals of
the intention. I like that. I feel like that's a good way to say it. Yeah.
Yeah. But
ends, ENS, something like that.
ENDS.
Oh, the ends.
Ends.
I see.
Yeah.
The means to the an ends.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So
means to an end.
Why are you saying what you're saying? Why are you interacting with this person? Are you trying to introduce yourself? Are you trying to, maybe you see a friend who's a little bit down, have the blues, right? Are you trying to
pep them up a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So in a business context, I feel like the ends tend to be clear, or they should be if it's going to be a good, productive meeting. Right? You have a purpose. Okay, we're going to resolve this today. We're going to negotiate this and come with an outcome, blah, blah, blah. It's interesting when you look at, going back to our other example of a date, right? When you're, what is the end there?
And it depends which date. Is it a first date?
First date.
Is it a blind date? Is it a date with the person you've been with forever?
Right. And I guess early dates still have pretty clear ends, which is to get to know the person better and
to see if there's a match.
Yeah, to figure out if you guys enjoy hanging out.
Yeah.
But once you've been dating someone for a while, or you're married, then what is the end? When you're sitting across from each other at a dinner table.
Well, I mean, it could be if you don't work together, then it could be like, running through the day, sharing some information from your day. Or if you do work together, it could be maybe you have like a business meting, which you probably shouldn't have because it's supposed to be a date night.
It's supposed to be a date.
Or maybe you're brainstorming if you're working. Or maybe you're talking about, how to raise children better. I don't know. Whatever.
Or maybe it's just, it's just a matter of connecting. The purpose is simply to hear what's on the other person's mind and to enjoy being in the relationship, right? Just enjoying each other's company. Yeah. I think that's the end.
You know what? It's so funny because you mentioned the date sort of scenario.
I just remember because you had a really good video. Was it last week or the week before?
I think it was last week. Yeah, how to make dinner date conversation. And this is for people on a romantic date or not, just hanging out with friends. Because a lot of times I feel like, especially now, we're just so much more engrossed in what's going on our screen.
We're so distracted.
And we're distracted. And it's like, just talk to the person across from you. Come on.
Yeah.
It always, gets me all... I almost feel like going up to people and say, why don't you just talk to each other?
Or, sitting down with them, let's get this conversation going.
I know, can you imagine? It's like the Mary Poppins of conversation. Oh my gosh, I would love that.
The Mary Poppins of conversation.
Yeah, just like float in with an umbrella.
Yeah. Or,
hi, everyone.
I think you would come and you'd be like the waiter and you'd bring the food and, by the way.
Here's a note card to help you launch into discussion. That'd be pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, this is like, I'm imagining a video here.
You saw it here first.
Yeah, maybe when we have a production crew, we can enact something like this.
That'd be cool. So it's just so important, right? To just be able to have the face-to-face interactions.
Right.
Nothing beats those. It's just so invigorating.
And then sometimes the end is really just that. It's just to have the interaction, right?
Yeah.
There's not much more. Think about it. When you go hang out with a friend, you say, well, today we're going to hang out because we want to achieve, X, Y, and Z,
Yeah.
No, you go to hang out with a friend because you don't frankly care what you're doing. You're just looking for the engagement.
And the company and just being around the people that you like to hang out with, just the energy. Two things. Okay, the first is with, you know what I really find so interesting. So sometimes you'll see old couples together, like older people, and they're clearly married or been together forever. And you can see that there's some there's this intimacy there, but they're not saying anything to each other. I'm thinking like at dinner or sometime, when they're out. But you can see like through their body language that they're still like communicating somehow.
And comfortable. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
So it's like transcended words.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's just about the presence of the person.
I think there's some phrase which is the more time you spend with someone, the less is said, but the more is understood.
Oh, that's a good one.
I don't know what the actual wording is,
Yeah,
but that's sort of my approximation of what the comment is. But the idea is, right, you need, the need to articulate is less because the depth of understanding
just so great.
Is so great, right? Just knowing how they put their hands and the way they've, tilted their head already is enough information for you because you know them so well.
Oh, it's so sweet. I love that. Oh. All right. And then the second thing, so in meetings, right, in terms of ends, in order to make sure that nobody veers off topic or goes off on a tangent, because you only have so much time to have a meeting, especially if you want to run it in an efficient way, which would be great.
You do.
You do. You do. Meeting notes, right? The agenda.
Yes.
And you have an itemized list of what's going to be discussed. And the last one I really like because, in meetings that I've been part of, a lot of times they'll have like the final item as AOB. Do you know what that might stand for?
No.
Any other business. And that's a great time to make, a special announcement, maybe an upcoming birthday. It depends on what kind of team, if it's like a group of teachers, let's say, or any other piece of information. It allows the other participants to chime in.
To get it
that's something that's not on the list. So that would be the time, right?
Interesting.
To keep it really contained. And in other meetings where I haven't had those meeting notes, it just goes in all sorts of directions.
Yeah.
Or you'll have like the head person just dominating. And then everyone else is just sitting.
I've totally seen, and that's a big risk.
That's a huge one.
And I think you're right. If you don't structure in the meeting
the ends,
but I was going to say also the ways to make sure that everyone in the room is speaking.
Yeah. Then
that does happen, right? Where just the person leading the meeting does the whole talking, which defeats the purpose of the meeting, right?
Exactly.
In most cases, if you're meeting, it's not a speech. A meeting shouldn't be a speech. A meeting is where you're, saying some information, but also getting feedback on the information you're saying and getting the group involved.
Yes.
That's the point of the meeting.
And on that, the risk of that, having just one dominant voice basically hog the conversation or the meeting, you run into the risk of groupthink. And we have a video coming out about that.
Yeah, groupthink.
So that's a big one.
And the other way to phrase it is, if you're running a meeting and you're the only one doing the talking, you might as well send an email, right? What's the point of doing it, right? And save everyone's time.
Yeah.
So in any event, I think having those notes can really help achieve your end.
Yeah. It's just everyone wants to know the purpose and the goal of
and probably stating that up front is good.
Yes, definitely. Okay, ready for the next one?
Yeah.
Okay, so here we have
we're on A, right?
A. Yeah, good job.
Yeah, I can spell sometimes.
Oh, you're a good speller.
I'm a miserable speller.
It's all the auto correction that we have now on our devices.
I was typing an email yesterday. This is crazy. Speaking of autocorrection.
Okay.
I was typing an email yesterday, and I was asking a company that I ordered something from, do you guys use FedEx or? And I just put or. And it autofilled UPS for me.
Oh my gosh.
It knew.
That's creepy.
The context in which I was saying and filled the name of another shipping company. I mean, wow. Okay. Total sidetrack, but the AI in predictive.
It's getting really good.
Predictive language tools is really blowing my mind.
And it also picks up on your speech patterns.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Because of AI.
Yeah.
There are conversation analysts out there working on machine learning.
I was going to say, I'm sure there are.
There are.
And I bet they would love to learn from you about the speaking model.
Yeah, well, they should be watching this.
It'd be curious or be interesting to sort of apply some of these concepts like Dell Hymes Speaking Model to the AI dialogue process, right? And I think it could help humanize that.
And that's what they're doing. I mean, it's not just Dell Hymes, obviously, but in the conversation analytic framework, we're looking at how, well, not me personally, obviously, but
well, it's your field.
It's my field, but we're looking at how, humans interact and using the Dell Hymes model to help make AI better, so that when you're on the phone, and you're doing like you're talking to an automation, right? A robot, basically, AI. Are they going to give you a what we call a preferred response or a dispreferred response? Like, is it going to sound like a human, or is it going to be like out of whack? Like, what is this?
Yeah.
How are you? Right? You say, how are you? And today the weather is, rainy and overcast. It's like, what?
Right.
Just as a very rudimentary example. So yeah, it's not just the online, like face-to-face, but it's also with AI eventually.
But I totally sidetracked.
No, it's okay. It's okay, because it's still part of all what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So A is act sequence.
Act sequence.
Yeah, and this is actually not too unrelated from what we just talked about with the robot and the preferred response or the dispreferred response, because it's about how the sequence that you have your speech acts, right? So think of the difference between starting a presentation you'll see what I mean in a sec. So let's say you're giving a presentation to the classroom, and you start with, everyone knows you, obviously, right? And you say, hi, my name is Mary Daphne. Today I'm going to be talking about conversation analysis. And it's like, wait, everyone in the classroom knows you. Is that appropriate to say, to introduce yourself to an audience that's already well familiar with you?
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you say that on stage to an audience that doesn't know you,
right,
that's different. And even, would you even start that way? Or would you start with ladies and gentlemen? Would you start with, so the point here is that the sequence influences the rest of the speech act and the the way the participants are going to receive the message. Okay,
so just so I'm clear, is this another? Tell me if this is another example.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about it.
When you give a speech, you can organize it in different ways. So I could begin the speech with the final point I'm trying to make.
Exactly.
Right, or I could begin the speech with an anecdote.
Yes.
Right, to frame the context.
Yep.
So these are act sequences?
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's the order that you introduce the topic or that you dive into the topic.
Right.
So I think...
and the sequence, you use the sequence to enhance the sort of the point that you're trying to make.
Yeah, if it's done well, right?
Okay.
If it's effective.
Right.
So something that you always get on my case about, because I just get too excited when...
I know you're going to talk about.
Okay, well, let's share it with the community. So basically, if we're with some friends or family, and there's a story I want to tell about an adventure or something, maybe even mundane, I don't know. I'll get right to the punchline.
She gets so excited. She gets so excited about the story and to communicate to everyone. And she jumps straight to the meat of it.
And obviously, I mean, that's like one way of. But then it's not really telling a story, right?
Right, but then you don't have the
story arc,
the rising action, and the climax,
and then the denouement.
Right.
Yes. So I just get straight to the punchline because I'm like, I don't want to waste anyone's time. Let's just tell them what happened.
Exactly.
And then you'll fill in all the details.
I know.
But then you'll be like, wait, hold up, MD, and then he'll.
Right. I try and stylize it a little more.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying here is that what I'm doing is not storytelling. I'm just sharing some details.
Fact sharing.
Some fact sharing with a little bit of, emotional enhancements, right? Like how
pizzazz.
we felt, pizzazz, the style.
Yeah.
But then you're a true master of...
I'm certainly not a master.
Okay, but you're really good at storytelling.
But I pay attention to it.
You're really good at storytelling. So
thank you.
It's true. So it's just funny because we treat it differently. So the goal there, right? The ends, we see that differently if it's like a story, right? So you'll see it as a story. Like the purpose is to entertain or get people on the edge of their seats.
Yeah.
Really, get people wrapped. And I just want to, if I don't treat it as a story, let's say, in that example, I'll just treat it as, you know what happened? This is what happened.
Yeah, and I feel like it goes almost beyond, it does go beyond entertainment. Part of the reason I like this lead up and creating this sense of anticipation and curiosity is because it really helps you drive your point home, right? It helps the listener also pay attention to the point. Because if you jump straight to the meat of what you're saying, the listener might not be ready
That's true.
to hear or to comprehend what you're saying. They might not have enough context.
Yeah.
It might also, their minds might be somewhere else.
Totally.
If you instead sort of lead up to it, they get more and more ready for it. And so when you finally make your point, they are totally enraptured in what you're saying.
Yeah.
And they'll remember it.
They'll remember it.
So I think it's not just the entertainment factor. It's fun to entertain, but it's also
driving home.
Yeah, it's a means of making of ensuring comprehension, I'd say.
Yeah, and you also gauge, if whether they're paying attention, right? You look around, you make eye contact.
Right.
So again, these are two different ways of sort of, sharing a story.
Yes.
And ends are just so important because as the speaker, you want to decide why, like what the purpose is. Why are you sharing this information? Is it to caution someone? Is it to, run a cool business idea by somebody, give them your pitch? Is it to entertain? Is it to prevent somebody from doing something, a cautionary tale? I don't know. So
the acts are used to deliver the ends.
Exactly.
Got it.
In the most effective way as possible.
By the way, we're already at the 30-minute mark, so let's see if we can.
There's so much here to dive into.
I know.
And by the way, I have a video about this, the Dell Hymes Speaking Model, which I run through these points. Check it out. In this one, we're talking more about like different everyday examples. But again, this is an ongoing conversation. I'm sure we'll have another one similar to this. Okay, let's keep going.
So we're at
Okay. So we're at key now.
Key.
Okay. Key. So that's the tone of voice. It's the manner in which you say something or share something.
Like what key? Like in music.
Yeah.
Is it a C pitch?
Exactly.
A pitch? Interesting.
It's the spirit of the way you're sharing something. It's all of the,
Is it light and bubbly or
is it
dark and somber?
Right. It's all the in-between stuff. It's not just the words themselves. And so this really adds the human element to what you're saying.
Sure.
Right? Because now AI is getting pretty good, but and it's still new. But you can tell when you're talking to a robot.
Totally.
Right? The tone is like very different.
Happy birthday.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, it's going to get much better when, machine learning.
I'm so happy you're here.
Right.
Yeah. Like, that's how it started out. But I suspect nowadays what they probably do is deliberately, they set the key for the type of speech act that is, taking place.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And even just like the inflection patterns where your voice rises and falls, whether you emphasize certain words over others. Are you adding emphatic stress to, again, drive home your point, right? So all of these things make up the key of the S.P.E.A.K.I.N.G model.
Right. There's so much in that.
It really is. Yeah.
That's interesting. Because obviously just the inflection can determine whether you're saying something in an authoritative, assertive way or whether you're sort of uncertain about it, right? Do you end on an uptick or do you end on an uptick or a downtick?
Right, exactly. And so with up talk too, like you can tell if it's going to be when you end in a question.
Right, exactly.
And certain parts, even in the US, like certain parts of the US will have that embedded in the social norms and other parts won't, right? So more so I think on the West Coast, up talk is more, it's more accepted and even considered, it could be part of professional communication. Right. But on the East Coast, up talk is not really
We're assertive here.
Seen as professional.
Yes.
So it just depends. And that's part of, well, we're going to get to it, but it's norms. Okay, let's go to instrumentalities.
Yes.
Oh, the other thing about key is also knowing turn taking. So the back and forth.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. And when, when to chime in after the other person is finished, right? At the possible completion point. Like if you've come to an end of what you're saying, or if you can continue, or if you'll continue.
Got it. Is that kind of like pacing as well?
It could be, but it's also like being aware of when to interrupt.
Okay.
So turn taking.
Just understanding the flow.
Yeah.
Conversation. Okay.
Yeah. And of course, sometimes it's okay to interrupt, and other times it's not.
Yes.
So it also depends.
All right.
Then we have N.
N.
And that's norms.
Okay.
So these are the social rules that govern the Speech Act, and
that I think would also have to do with when to interrupt or not, right?
Of course.
Do you know, when do you interject? I just interrupted you right there, by the way.
And it's okay.
It's okay. I'm glad you allowed me to do it.
But think of cultures where they have the honorifics, right? And so, like, I'm thinking of Japan, where there's a specific hierarchy that's very, very important.
Yes.
Interruption might not fly there.
Totally. And actually, going back to our conversation about meetings and one person talking versus the group talking, particularly in Asia, and I think Japan would be a good example of this. Oftentimes, it's only the senior person that is talking. Because it would be rude for a junior person to speak. Because their experience is so little.
Right. What could they possibly contribute?
Right. And I think that's a carryover from a time where that was the case. But that actually ends up causing a lot of challenges for management, because you don't understand what's going on sort of in the lower ranks.
Right.
But to your point, there are some very set types of speech dynamics that are embedded in the culture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the point is, to try to be aware of them. And if you're studying abroad, or if you're working abroad, and you're learning a new language, which is amazing, good on you. We're big proponents of that, as you know. Just be aware of the speaking model. So take the speaking model and really think about it. Okay, in this setting, do I understand, the social norms? Am I aware of potential honorifics in that culture and language? And learn it, try to, respect it, and then try it out yourself and be part of that framework in that different setting.
I think the more you can adopt those norms, the more fluent you're going to sound, irrespective of your vocabulary
or
grammar. If you can understand the norms around when to say things, how to say them, who to say them to.
Yes.
That is probably more important when you're seeking fluency.
Exactly. And then that would mean that you have communicative competence, not just linguistic competence, which is knowing the vocabulary or the grammar, but you have the communicative competence because you are now aware of the context.
Right.
Yeah. So important. So important. Okay.
They're all important.
They're all important. Okay. And then the last one,
G.
Can you guess?
Gregarious, I can. No.
Genre. Okay.
I wasn't going to guess that.
Okay. So the genre, right? Think about like the style of what you're saying. Is it a joke? Is it gossip? Is it a story? What is it? What genre is it?
So is it the genre of delivery or
of it all? Because it influences the delivery. It influences the way you say it, what you say. And like, for example, sarcasm is not something that is prevalent in all cultures or within speech communities. So that's something to be mindful of too, right? So if somebody is trying to be sarcastic in a culture that has no idea about sarcasm or just is not ready for it or not attuned to it, then, there might be a miscommunication.
Well, to me, that sounds more like a norm, the sarcasm.
I think there's some overlap.
Okay.
Wouldn't you say?
Well, so, I'm just trying to understand the genre.
Yeah.
So would these be genres like, would a speech versus a business meeting versus a date, are those the genre?
Those are speech acts.
Those are speech acts. Okay.
Yeah. So the tricky part here is that all of these components, somebody asked me actually, could you give me an example where all of these show up in a conversation? All of them do show up in a conversation. These are all part of like the whole speaking model. Those are the tools that we have to understand and analyze a conversation. So they all show up.
Right.
And sometimes there's a little bit of overlap too. So I think sarcasm in the sense of like, whether it's appropriate in that culture, that I think you're right. That would be a social norm that's governing, right?
Right.
But think about, delivering a joke, let's say. Sarcasm might show up in a joke.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. And that would be a genre. The
that
genre
would be
is
the
a joke.
genre.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But you could also think of genre like within a story. Is it a scary story? Is it a funny story? Is it a right?
Right.
It's like the style.
Interesting. Yeah, the nature of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Yeah.
It's really interesting.
And I guess what would be a good way to reinforce these different principles or concepts is to just essentially, I don't know, you can watch a TV show or review interactions and try to break each one, to analyze it and to sort of annotate which aspects are present in that conversation.
Right.
You could just watch a scene over and over again, and then here's the S, the P.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea.
That'd be a good way to reinforce it.
Definitely, especially if you're, learning a new language and also trying to understand the culture.
Yeah, what I like about this whole framework is, I mean, obviously, when you're talking to someone, it's not like this is, going to be going through your head in the moment necessarily.
No. Can you imagine pulling up like a piece of paper?
Right.
Hold on a sec. Okay.
By the way, it sounds like,
You got the key here.
The key here.
Yeah.
I noticed that you used a hieroglyph, but I do think the exercise of running through this does make you a more
socially
conscientious speaker, right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And because of that, even though you're not thinking about it explicitly when you're talking to someone, I think you become more attuned to the dynamics of the conversation, and it allows you to interact in a way that's more comfortable, more natural. Right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I think it also reduces, because even in the language you grew up speaking, having this understanding of the framework will also reduce your social anxiety if you have any, like even around something like networking.
Right.
Right? Because if you go in thinking about, the key or what topics might be taboo to bring up in that setting because it might not be appropriate, right?
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
Right. So you use this as almost a framework for preparation for the context that you're going into.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
And that way, when you're going in, you already know sort of roughly what tone to use, like you're saying, and sort of
what topics to
discuss and what you shouldn't. Yeah. What a great
and then
application
also
of this.
Your purpose too, right?
Yeah.
You might go in saying, I just want to make some friends, or like work friends, or I want to find somebody to be the graphic designer or a business partner.
Right.
You have to go in with an understanding so it can inform your, you don't have to, but it would be a very productive use of your time to do that.
Absolutely. I love it. We're at the 45-minute mark now.
Wow, that was so fast.
Right. I know.
We could just talk about this all day.
Dell Hymes.
Dell Hymes Speaking Model.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's pretty cool.
So much to go through there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah. So
I
think
we'll continue talking about this some other
Yeah.
way.
I'm sure there are plenty more ways to do it. And I would love to end with just what you're saying, which is that this framework can be used as so I guess we both said something I think meaningful about it, which is one, it can be used as a tool to make you a more aware and conscientious speaker, but also can be used as a very powerful means of preparing for a context that you might otherwise be uncomfortable to go into.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And again, it's also a great tool to use when you're learning another language as well. So
all right.
That's a wrap.
We'll cut it off there. Yeah.
Comment below. Share with us your thoughts.
Yeah.
We love hearing from you all.
Definitely.
So.
And thanks for joining us.
Yes,
we'll see you again next week.
We will.
Probably similar time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And she decides these things.
I think next week at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. And we have an upcoming video coming out as well. And feel free to sign up for our newsletter where you get one email from us a week So if that's something that you're interested in, just go to myexlearning.com.
Yep.
And
We'll get you all
sign
sorted
up.
out.
Yep.
All right.
All right,
Thanks a lot,
everyone.
guys.
Thank
Great
you
to
so
see you,
much.
Enroll. Yep.
Take care, everyone.
care.
Bye-bye. Happy exploring.